Like how many man team would have to be in on this? You think like 2 at least?
Yeah, bro. You'd probably have to have at least 3. Yeah.
Let's 3 or 4. So now you have to trust too that you're going to do this minimum edge, and none of these 4 guys are going to squeal. No one's going to say anything. True. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, okay, you really want to risk your reputation for that? Like, okay, go for it. But like,
I don't know, when people are playing for 10 million, I don't think people care that much about reputation. I'll be honest. Like
some people, sure. Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
Welcome everybody to DAT Poker Podcast, episode 168. We are off and running here, presented by Daniel Negreanu's Masterclass of Poker. I'm your host, Dave Schwartz, alongside the producer of this fine program. It is Roscoe P. Coltrane.
I wasn't paying attention because I usually don't.
And Terrence Chan. T, how are you?
Hello. It's summer, and it's summer. I got out of Vegas because it was too hot, and then I came to the interior of British Columbia, where it's just as hot
and everything's on fire. And Daniel Negreanu in Las Vegas. Daniel, how are you, sir?
Well, y'all think it's hot where y'all are. Yeah. I'll tell you what hot looks like. Hot, Las Vegas hot. You can't go in the backyard and step on the fake grass without burning your feet. We had like record temperatures. We're looking at 115.
How do you walk the dogs?
See, that's the thing, is like, really don't walk them. I take them out back. Yeah. Let them do their business. Little Rocky doesn't like going through the doggy door, so he has his own little spot in the house that he takes his dumps occasionally, which we'll survive. We'll live with because we got to. But generally, what I'll do is like when the sun goes down, like right now, it's 7 p.m. It's only 1:09. So, as long as the sun's not up, then the concrete's not that bad. They can handle it.
Do the dog poop? Does it spontaneously combust and burst into flames? Like, is it
great? Honestly, I really think like Rocky's the only one who does it, because Apollo goes in out the doggy door, no problem. I just want to say, I think he's super respectful, because there's a hallway that goes to this third bedroom that nobody ever goes in, right? That little area right there, he's decided, away from everybody else, listen, that's my little toilet. That's where I'm going. And we love it. Even Amanda, who hates smells, she's really anti-pee. But like, when he shits over there, she doesn't even get mad. It's like, that's it. I think he's being respectful by not shitting on the carpet, in the living room or anywhere like that. He goes where nobody goes. That's, it's a sign of a respectful dog.
All right, let's jump right into it. The 2024 summer camp for poker players in Las Vegas has concluded. The World Series of Poker for 2024. A lot of lead up. We did shows going through the schedule. We were all pumped and ready to go. I went down. Terrence went down. Daniel played every event that he could, obviously, or we'll talk a little bit about that.
He just won a poker bracelet.
Yeah, he did win a poker bracelet, his 7th, the PPC, the one outside of the main event. I'm sure, Daniel, probably the one you wanted to win the most, right?
The PPC, for sure. Like, listen, if you're a mixed game guy, that's the one to win, right? Like, it's 9 different disciplines. It's all pros. And when you look at the structure, this isn't like a crapshoot. Like, unfortunately, the way that it's set up, all the high rollers are pretty much crapshoots, 40-minute levels. The PPC, we have 3-hour and 20-minute levels against really, really good players. You know what I mean? Like, you look at the last 2 tables, you don't see random wrecks like in a PPC. It's very, very difficult. It's a smaller field. People go, you only beat 88. But look who, So that's one. I tell you what, I won my 7th, right? After a very long hiatus. And I'm so thankful that it happened not in the 330 hyper turbo super bounty online event, right? Where I rebought 5 times, but actually a meaningful one that was certainly meaningful to me. It's my birthday tomorrow, so my wife, she took 5 pictures from the day and she put them up right here in the office. I can't show you from here, but little Missy's been hard at work for DNegs' 50th birthday tomorrow. Look what she did. Okay, so this is the office, as you guys know, where we shoot stuff.
I put that together.
She put that together too. But look what she added for the birthday. Look at this. Boom, yeah, we hit the river. Hell yeah. Oh, tears. Oh, bracelet. Oh, winner. Isn't that beautiful?
Aww.
Nice little touch.
Hardest thing to hang ever.
Yeah, she's sweating. She needs a break.
Measuring in that.
You did good, babe. This looks beautiful. Thank you.
I'm glad you love it.
Happy birthday, me.
Happy birthday.
Very sentimental, very beautiful. It's nice to have her there. But yeah, if you're gonna get off the schneid, that's the one to do it in.
Let's talk a bit on the overview here about the health of the World Series of Poker, because I think a lot of the records, the main event we'll talk about, but overall, I think tournament poker is healthy, right? We look at the World Series poker. We look at some numbers are going to be up, some numbers are going to be down in different events. They'll change year over year, but as a whole, the numbers are up, and that's sort of the important number. And we talk about the health of tournament poker in the world. You got to come out of the World Series of Poker on many levels bullish on the future, given the turnout this year. Terrence, you've been involved with tournament poker for a long time. I'm sure you noticed that as well.
Yeah, so obviously the main event did great as usual, as expected. I wonder whether it's the health of tournament poker or the health of the game overall, or it's just a lot of the credit I think should go to the World Series of Poker itself. I mean, it has created its own brand. It knows how to run these gigantic tournaments. I mean, if how many human beings in the world know how to run a 10,000 player tournament? Like there's only a few, and most of them work for the World Series of Poker. It's a logistically incredibly difficult thing to do. Not only do they have things like the main event, they have multiple tournaments a day. A lot of days they have 3 bracelet events and God knows how many of the daily deep stacks and all, and the satellites and all this kind of stuff. They have so much going on in the room, and it mostly works. Like obviously, like there's some stuff. Sometimes you get buried in if you're playing like a 1K, you get buried in a late registration line that's hours and hours and hours long, and that sucks. And sometimes you're at the cage for forever, but mostly it works. Like, I mean, I think every year I find a few annoyances that are like, okay, well, that's an area to improve. That's an area to improve. Like there's always got to be. But when you think about just having thousands and thousands of people in the room all to play a whole bunch of different poker events, not just one event a day like it used to be, but just like 7, 8, 9, 10 events, of all these different price points. I mean, I think a lot of credit has to go to the World Series of Poker itself. And it's hard to use the World Series main event as it's tempting to use it always as a barometer for how good poker is. Oh, like, the World Series of Poker main event took off with Moneymaker and it fell off during UIGEA, and then it really went off a cliff during Black Friday. Like, we use it as a barometer, and it is a useful barometer, but it's not the only measuring stick. And to some extent, the World Series main event is more of a barometer of just how good the World Series of Poker is doing.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to somebody who I think is really underappreciated, and that's Jacked Effel. That's his new name, by the way.
Yeah, so you got
Effel.
I was like, who's this?
Listen, and then you're
Jack
also
Effel.
talking about Ozempic. No. This guy was who knows how big, right? Like big. Like, I think 300, right? The man is 8% body fat, and he's jacked. Ozempic don't do that, bro. That ain't Ozempic. That's this man, finally making the decision to, take his health as a priority. As far as the World Series goes, and obviously the logistical nightmare, which you sort of touched on, which it is. One thing that I thought really stuck out was last year there was a concerted effort to make it the biggest main event ever, to cross the 10,000 player mark, to beat the Jamie Gold year in terms of prize pool, right? They didn't do that this year. So everyone sort of assumed there'd be a little bit of a drop off, and everyone would have considered that a success. 9,700, 98. But to get over 10 without really focusing on that, the fact that they did that, they broke that record. I know, and I agree with Terrence, it's not the only barometer. It is an important one, of course, because it is what the mainstream media looks at and other things like that. But overall, I mean, I think and the other thing you got to consider too, which I don't think people really do, is the World Series of Poker for many years in Las Vegas owned the summer, right? That's it. World Series of Poker is where it's at, right? Well, guess what? Now, other properties, smartly, people go nuts when I use this word because they think it's a negative connotation, leached, right? They take advantage of the fact that a whole bunch of poker players are here in Las Vegas. So they say, listen, we're going to offer tournaments over at the Wynn. We're going to offer tournaments at the Venetian. We're going to offer it all around town, right? So with that, the WSOP still is able to fade all the competition, kind of like taking advantage of the people that are there and continue to thrive and hit those numbers. Now, other properties are doing great, which is a testament to the overall growth of poker as a whole. But what I'm so pumped on is the fact that like the World Series brand itself still is what draws it all, right? Like if you took the World Series out of there, I'm sure something would replace it, but it wouldn't have the same sort of cachet and branding as the World Series of Poker does.
We joke, you even hear those jokes at the table. So you're playing in some tournament and, your table sucks. And it's all tough pros or whatever. And you could be playing over in some soft tournament to win, but you're here to win this little trinket of metal. And it's funny that poker players, for all their talk about how it's all just about the money and it's all about the money, the World Series draws these numbers because of the prestige of this little chunk of metal.
Yeah,
Wow.
There's a way to sort of just like when you think of a dollar bill, right? Like, how does a currency have value? Why does gold have any value? Because we've decided that it does, right? Now that we've decided that crypto, a Bitcoin, a piece of currency has value, all of a sudden this is something people want. The World Series of Poker since 1970 has done a great job of making the World Series of Poker bracelet coveted. Now, you will have some pushback from people who say, oh, it's watered down, it's gone too far. And I can sort of get on board with that to a certain degree. Having said that, it still is the premier event, right? It spawned all the other series. None of them would, EPT would not exist. None of this would have existed without WSOP being there. And for it to still be the prominent brand, with expansion, I think is really impressive. And you have to give a lot of praise and kudos to like everyone involved. I think there's a huge misconception that they don't care about poker or the brand or the growth. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And you look at the results. Yeah, you're not going to agree with every decision, right? Like I remember years ago, I'm like, what are you doing having tournaments under $1,000, right? I thought that was insane. I'm like, what are we doing here? But, you know, poker evolves, poker changes, and they stay one step ahead. And, you know, I'm always going to be a WSOP fan.
All those tournaments breed players that move up the ladder, right? We need that bottom ladder to start moving people up, whether it's tournaments, whether it's cash games. That's always been healthy for the poker economy. And to your point, Daniel, about tournaments and other properties, rising waters, they float all boats, right? I mean, they're going to drive people over to the World Series as well. And then when they cash, or people are going to go over there and you know, get better and learn how to play, that kind of thing. So I totally agree. I think it's in really good hands right now. You mentioned Jack Ethel.
That's
Daniel, Jack Ethel, who, yeah, when I was down there and saw him, I was shocked at the transformation for him in such a short period of time. It's fantastic to see and inspirational, right? Like poker players, all of us are, you know, sometimes we'll put on 20 pounds.
He didn't even have to make like a 6-figure prop bet or anything, as far as I know. He just actually decided to do.
Yeah, that's great. So we'll jump into the main event here in a second, but I also want to touch on the coverage that was done by Poker Go, because I think, you know, Daniel, you were in every event pretty much and probably not watching a lot of this, but for those of us watching at home, watching your run in the Poker Players Championship and all the other events, and then on to the main event, I thought the coverage this year was fantastic, and I completely enjoyed the night shift. I think everybody did with Nick and Ali. They were fantastic, and then just the running coverage with the different people who were coming in and out. I really found a little bit of a affinity for Blesnik, who did some color as well, and he was fantastic and interesting to watch and listen to and talk about hands, and just get your overall thoughts. First, Terrence, what did you think of the cover?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I think, you know, like for mixed games, I loved having Chris Vich on. He was fantastic. He was a lot of Daniel's Final Table. He was on there for the main event. I didn't watch the first few days, but once I started getting into it, I mean, it was fun to watch. I think there was probably a big movement for, you know, you mentioned the night shift, for getting those guys on the day shift, you know, during the main event. I think it might be time for that. There was a lot of conversation revolving around whether it's time for that, given that we're behind a paywall now. The demographics that are watching the World Series main event are sort of the more serious players, the players that are trying to learn, the players that are watching it for the poker, and less about, you know, the comedy talk show aspect of things, to make it be more about the game. And, you know, what's an interesting decision point on this hand? What should you be thinking about if you're this guy or this lady? You know, what are you know, everybody always talks, oh, nobody wants to hear about ranges. It's like, no, people really do, because if you can, people love watching Daniel, you know, in these hands, break down a guy and narrow down a guy to a hand where Daniel ends up going, you have either pocket nines or pocket eights. And sure enough, the guy's pocket nines or pocket eights. But why did Daniel do that? It's because Daniel started with all the hands that this guy had and then went through these actions, and through his actions figured out that the most likely holding is like some middling pair. Like,
okay, I have to jump in and disagree with you vehemently.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, what people want to hear with commentary, obviously, if there's a big hand at the main event final table for chip lead and stuff like that, you can get into the nitty gritty of like the actual, you know, hand, or we can talk about the best condiments for a hot dog and, you know, like 12 years ago. And I think that is what the people wanted. They want to hear about, you know, food choices and things completely unrelated to the game. Am I wrong, or what did I miss here? That's what I've heard. Okay. On my Twitter feed,
you fucking scared me there. Jesus.
On my Twitter feed, like I said, you're right. I didn't get to watch a lot of it, but I saw a whole bunch of people really pissed off about like super intricate big moment spots, and then the commentary team being in La La Land. And I want to say, like, the thing is, doing a live stream is very, very, very different. I've done both. Do a live stream versus a canned show.
Yeah.
Canned show, you can actually figure out, okay, this is when people talk. Let's insert this here. You can prepare for it. You get the video a week in advance. When it's a live stream, you got to be on your toes, man. You can't be telling a dumb freaking story like about something that's unrelated to the game.
Yeah.
You know,
Or you've got to interrupt it. You've got to have the knowledge to be like, oh my God, this is a cooler of a flopper. Oh my
like,
God, what a
hold that
wild
thought.
raid.
Like,
You have to stop what you're
gloss
doing and be
over.
like,
You
yeah.
can't have the commentary track about like the most crucial hand being about, you know, condiments for hot dogs and whether it's a sandwich or.
But here's the thing. What I'll say is, I think that I'm not sure that that's. I mean, we're talking about Lon and Norm, right? I think that's probably the people. We know what Lon and Norm are. They're very.
They fucking terrible. They're
well,
just shit.
They've been.
I mean, look, I'm gonna be just. They're fucking terrible. Like this is the common thread of what everyone says. They suck. Let's replace them for live streams because
Okay,
they
hang on.
don't.
That's what I was. That's where I was going. Like they're very much in the taped genre, right? Like they're good when they can have time to write jokes and think about moments, and they don't have to react instantly. And they're not. You know, Norm isn't a high level player. Nick is. So, but what I'm saying is that they've been put in the wrong spot.
If we ever go back to the old ESPN, we're going to have like an hour-long show and exhibit this World Series as like this big documentary style thing. Then Lon and Norm, fine, like absolutely fine. They're built for that. But yeah, if I'm going to sit there for like 6 hours watching guys play high stakes poker, like I want rational thought about what I'm actually watching. I want somebody to tell me something that I couldn't have thought of. You
mentioned somebody earlier, and I wanted to go down this road. You mentioned Jared Blesnick, right? One of the things I thought he was so appealing about is the fact that he was going scorched earth, right? Yeah. Generally in the commentary booth, you're not trying to criticize the players too much, right? But what we found in golf and all these sorts of things is the commentary that people either love or hate, but they have an opinion about, is when people do that. Like when Blesnick says, I hate it. This is terrible. This is good, you know? And he has the cachet to be able to say these things because he is a high stakes player. You can disagree with some of the spots. I actually listened to some of the commentary he made of me, and I talked to him after and convinced him he was wrong on a couple. But I heard Scott Seaver mention, I heard a couple like Chris Kruk, you know, is another one who like, they pull no punches, right? Because they're not trying to, and I think that's okay in some environments, right? What you don't want to do is have that in, you know, $1,500 buy-in when there's, you know, recreationals and amateurs.
Absolutely.
You never rip them. Like the PPC, the 50K, or even the main event final table. Like that's a, you know, by then it's like everyone's going to make $1 million. So what if they have sour grapes? You don't want to do that at the lower limits. But I think at the high level, let's go full scorched earth and have a commentator like, you know, rip a bad play when it's a bad play.
And when you watch sports on TV, if somebody just like makes a horrendous turnover, like just a god awful play, the announcers will say, "Oh, what a tremendous mistake by so and so." It's not. They don't have to worry that they're going to see them the next day, and the player is going to come up to them and say, "Hey, fuck you! Why did you? You said that was a horrendous play. Like I'm under a lot of pressure here. Like you don't get that. You know, you're
objectively really bad plays, right? Like poker is so nuanced, and look, Kristen's bust out hand's a perfect example. Oh well, she check raised all in. Some are saying it's a punt. Some are saying it's he only calls. This is
why you have like. Well, you like what is the most successful show ever when it comes to sports commentaries inside the NBA? Because you have Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal, and they have their opinions on things. They don't necessarily have to be right, but you know what? They have the pedigree. They can stake their claims, right? So we can even debate. Like they don't have to be right. Is the point? Like a commentator saying this is a terrible play. Like who's the golf guy? I can't remember, but there was a golf legend commentary, and he would say things, and golfers hated him because he would like be wrong on stuff or whatever. But the point is. I think people want to like
hear from Watkins. I think it was Lanny, wasn't it?
Who?
Was it Lanny? Lanny Watkins?
I'm not sure. I can't remember his name. But either way, I think people generally like to hear from experts, right? Like when an expert says something, they have a reason for saying it. And then later, you know, you can like sometimes Shaq and Charles don't agree. Charles will say they're playing terrible. There's no way they're going to win this game if they keep playing like this. And Shaq's like, hold on, look at this, you know? So they can argue and have that rapport in the back and forth, right? That's kind of interesting. But again, that's a slippery slope when it comes to the game we play because they're not all professionals, right? They're not paid to play. These are just regular Joes. Like, you don't want to rip it. I did it 1 year, and he was really upset, actually. Years ago, I was a little bitter, and I busted a final table. Andrew Pantling was playing fucking crazy, right? He was 3-betting me with 9 deuce off and all this kind of stuff. So I went in the commentary booth, and I said some maybe not so great things about some of the plays that he made. And then his friends and family watched it, and they were like, you know, they were like, why is he being a jerk? You know? And then like, he was mad at me a little bit, you know? And again, like he was a good player, but he wasn't like a pro player. So like, again, that's why I think it's a, you know, like a balance, I guess, like of understanding who you're dealing with. And poker is unique because like, it's not all pros who are being paid.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump to the main event. We mentioned it earlier, over 10,112 entrants, setting an all-time record, eclipsing last year's 10,043. And I think it was the largest prize pool in the history of poker, and people were complaining about, and I understand why, that the World Series finished second again. They got, what is it, 7 or 8 million in Rake that they ended up making. And then, I was doing something more Rake is better. Haha, I get it, all that. But I mean, this is a large event put on by a huge entity in a, convention center right on the strip, that their opportunity cost for renting these places out is quite large. So is really 7 and 8 million just a crazy amount of money to put on the main event of the World Series of Poker and provide the poker community with this amazing experience that so many people, that 10,000 people get, and then untold however many are watching, sweating and doing all that. I mean, are we over this World Series of Poker rakes too much, or it takes too much Rake anymore? Or are we still like, that's crazy? I don't know, Terrence, what do you think?
I mean, do I wish the Rake were less? Sure. I mean, it's of course I want more money going to the players, but no, I don't think it's a reason. It's hard. It's also at a more expensive casino than it used to be. I think you could make like a lot stronger argument when it was back at the Rio, where land is basically free. And the Rio had tremendous amount of issues with security in the parking lot and things they weren't taking care of. I was much more critical of the World Series in years past. Now that it's moved to Paris and Horseshoe, and there's the associated cost with running that. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the fair amount of Rake is. I don't know what all of these things cost, but it's very clear that the market will bear it, because 10,112 players were willing to say that, like, whatever it is, 9,400 plus 600 is an acceptable number to play in the main event.
Yeah, I was going to just touch on that. Like, it's as simple as this. If you make a cheeseburger that costs you $1.45 and you sell it for $25 and people are buying them and they're flying off the shelves, the value of those cheeseburgers are at least $25. Okay. At least, right? Because people are paying it. The World Series of Poker, whatever the rake is, the numbers continue to go up. Right. So obviously, the market feels like, okay, this is worthwhile investment for me to make. Right. In addition to that, I think the thing people miss out on is, like, if organizers and operators didn't make substantial profit off these things, there's no value in running them, because they can rent those rooms out to pool tournaments, to a whole bunch of other things, and just like not have it. So the fact that they're doing well and poker's doing well, like, it's sort of like, all encompassing. Like, if you saw the numbers start to drop and people are going, you know what, maybe we can't handle this, then maybe you have to start looking at maybe, the pricing's the problem, right? But when you see like a continuous boom where the numbers are up, and certainly I think, listen, everyone's always going to, like you said, Terrence, everyone would love the rake to be zero, right? Then the problem is, like, who's going to run the tournaments for zero? Like, you have dealers to pay, you have staff to pay, you have, rooms to rent, you have a whole bunch of ancillary costs to this. So yeah, what do you expect? Like, what organization is going to run a tournament for 2 weeks in a casino and not look to, like, make millions of dollars from it? Like, it's a no-brainer.
Hi. Nice to be on your show again.
Alan doesn't like it.
Yeah, no, I mean, just further to that point, I was down there for a little while and fully enjoyed the experience. Stayed in the Horseshoe. Obviously, the rooms aren't spectacular, but they're not that bad, and they're 2 minutes away from the poker happening downstairs. So, in the dealers were all really good. The floor, it was run really well. I played a lot of cash games. I played only one tournament, but fully enjoyed my experience down there. I'm glad it's there and not the Rio anymore. I know some of us kind of nostalgic, think back to how great it was at the Rio, but I think I like it over at the Strip better. All right, back to the main event.
One complaint I have. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm not a big fan of walking through the Horseshoe.
Smoky.
To day two, because it is what it is. It's low ceilings. It's Las Vegas. And you just like, I'm not a big fan. I get it.
It was nice at the Rio. You drive up to the parking lot and you never see the casino at the Rio.
I would never go in the casino once, like during the Rio, because you're always in, in the convention area and there's no smoking there. But in order to get to the Horseshoe, you have to go through that. But again, that's, it is what it is. A lot of people are like, can they tell everyone to stop smoking during the World Series? I'm like, I don't know about that.
Here's a question. So here's a question for you. If you had to set an over-under on what year there will no longer be smoking in Las Vegas casinos. Like, people used to think this was impossible for poker rooms until it happened. Over-under, what year do you guys have on there being no more smoking in Las Vegas casino?
Well, it's interesting, right? Park MGM, I think it's Park MGM, is a non-smoking casino, and it's pretty busy. I was over there walking through and noticed that.
If I said
The market,
2030, do you like over under?
like in any casino,
Yeah, so there's no more smoking
well, that would have to be
inside
a law
Las Vegas.
because they're just going to react to markets, right? So
It'd be a law.
unless like Nevada said, no more smoking indoors in a casino, because what'll happen is
Yeah, well, that includes that. That would be included in the
So
bet.
I'd say over then probably, because I don't think that's going to happen. But I think more casinos once it's proven how popular it is to be in the non-smoking casino, you might get to 50-50 or something like that. But I don't see Nevada doing that. But I could be wrong.
I have a different over-under on that one.
Okay.
Mine is I have over an asteroid hitting us and civilization no longer existing.
That
like,
included.
I have
That's
just
included.
like a day over that, because then there will be no smoking casinos because we won't be here. But until that point, yeah, over. It's like, I mean, it just
over anything that's in our
right?
lifetime.
What are casinos doing? They're taking advantage of people's vices, right? Like they like to gamble, they like to drink, you get free alcohol. They also like to smoke, right? These are the exact kind of, that's your target audience, the relaxation, the freedom to have it. Now, I could see a push towards more areas that are like completely non-smoking, and then maybe even like, how they have in airports where like you have like slot machine area in Vegas and you can go like smoke in there. Like,
that seems like the worst place on the planet. You're literally trapped in a cigarette smoke bubble.
I really think like doing that, like being in that, makes you maybe like question your life choices, right? Because you're in there like in just like a cloud of disgusting brown gray smoke.
They can't get out. There's nowhere for the cigarette to go.
You're in this little thing. You're looking around at everybody else. And you're like, guys, what are we even doing here?
I mean, we said, said asteroid hitting Earth or whatever, but I mean, when we started playing poker in the 90s, it seemed impossible that poker rooms would be smoke free. And now you can't find a smoke room.
Just to show you how much we're going the other way, I just saw this on Twitter today. There's talk, and I can't remember the casino that's going to do this. For high rollers, for VIPs, when you rent your room, you just call ahead, let them know which slot machines you prefer. They will bring them to your room. They are going to bring slot machines, put them in your room, so you literally never have to leave your room, and just be
amazing.
Did you see Josh Arias tweet? He tweeted it, he quote tweeted it, and Josh goes, "Oh my God, you know how much money we can make in a summer like this?" Like, he's just like, we're going to make so much money.
That's done at some point, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's a little extreme, but hey.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was a slot player and I like enjoyed it, I kind of would probably like to do it in my room. I don't know. Maybe.
You have it. You can do it on your phone. Why do you need a slot machine?
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
You get the big machine and ding, 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 and the big prize pools. I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
You do this like there's still a handle, as if you can find one of these with a handle.
They have these anywhere?
No, they're all
Even downtown.
No, there's handles. There
are handles.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're handles.
My mom loved the handles.
Adam's a slot machine expert in this group, I guess.
Yeah. We saw deep runs for players such as Alex Keating, Brian Rast. This is in the main event, and we touched on it earlier. Kristen Foxen, and her bust out hand had a lot of chatter going on the old poker Twitter. And do you guys want to quickly touch on it?
Sure.
So they're down to 13 players. Joe Searock opens under the gun with Ace of Spades, King of Clubs for 2.4 million at 1.2 million big blind. Kristen calls in the big blind with King of Spades, Queen of Diamonds. The flop is Ace of Hearts, King of Hearts, Jack of Spades. Searock flops top two, and Kristen flops middle pair with a gutter. She check calls 4 million on the flop. The turn is the 5 of Spades, bringing 2 flush draws. Kristen checks. Searock bets 11.6 million, and Kristen moves in after a think for about 37 million total. And Joe checks his cards and calls. And she's out when no 10 rolls off to make her straight. It seemed like there was a lot of people saying, what's she trying to get to fold here? That's better. Does she have showdown value? Can she call the turn? Can she fold the turn? That kind of thing. Terrence, your general thoughts on that hand? It's hard in a vacuum. We said that earlier. But this one's a big one with 13 people left. Everybody was cheering for Kristen. Let's get a woman to the final table. It's been a while. They were cheering her on for sure.
I think that's clearly why we're talking about this hand and not whatever hand the 17th place guy busted out with. everybody was cheering for Kristen here to make it deep, to represent, to have a first one of the final table since Barbara Enright. I'm reminded of that year where we had two women busting in 11th and 10th, Gail Bauman, Elizabeth Hill, and we had two women go super deep this year. One was, I think, the day 6 trip leader, and she ended up not making it terribly close to the final table. So everybody thought, well, hey, this year we finally get a woman back at the final table, and if it's going to be a woman, what an incredible representative of women at the final table, the absolute best no limit hold'em woman player in the world. So let's break down this hand. I mean, first of all, Kristen Foxen is much better at no limit hold'em than I am. She understands the game much better than I am. And on the other hand, I'll say I can't find a reason to really like this hand. I mean, I've read a lot of the analysis, but this doesn't seem like the hand that you make this play with. It feels like the hand that you're supposed, like, if you're going to find bluffs here, they're probably Queen X hearts, 10X hearts. Like, those are the kind of hands. Like, this is, you mentioned it's kind of like, you're probably just going to want to call the turn if you're going to continue with this hand. Folding the turn would be somewhat heroic. I mean, you certainly can make strong arguments for that, given the range disadvantage, and then kind of seeing what happens on the river and, check folding a lot of unimproved rivers. But she made this play. There are probably some like ace-x hands that Joe will fold here. If he's barreling draws, then that, she unblocks the front door flush draw, which is nice, in case he has that. The question is, like, does he actually barrel with all of these hands? And it feels like probably not. Like, it's probably just really overweighted towards the nuttiest of hands when he fires the second barrel. He does he have like ace-8, all this kind of stuff? Like, I don't know. Like, probably not at this stage of this tournament. Maybe it's hard. It is hard to find the hands that he will fold, that he will two barrel and bolt fold at this point in the main event. And of course the solver will say that he's going to have some bet fold hands. I don't know if real life he has that many. It feels like he has very few. And she wants to have some bluffs here, but she is at such a tremendous range disadvantage against the under the gun raiser here. Like, he's just going to smash this flop just a tremendous amount of the time. And even if this is one of the times that he is barreling with air, then he gets to just do that because he's got lots of chips and he's got the range advantage. Like, that's kind of the way the game works.
Yeah. So on the bluffs, I think the bluffs, like the class of hands, like, first of all, we don't even know necessarily if this was a bluff or, an equity denial situation. But if it is a bluff, let's say it is a bluff with the goal of, moving an ace, I think you're probably better off having, rather than like when you get called like 3 outs, potentially having like straight end flush draw. Either one, right? Now, I had the pleasure of, when this was happening live, I had the pleasure of sitting with Chris Brewer and Joao Vieira, and they were going over every spot, like super GTO, da-da-da-da. And, they didn't like the play very much. They had their reasons for it. For me personally, I look at, the macro view, and I think with who was left, I think she's way too good to get it in there. I think she's too good of a player. She mentioned this herself, because I was listening to one of the interviews. She mentioned how, when you're a good player, like, you have to pass on some spots in the main event, right? You pass on some small EV spots because they're too high risk and they're not worth, like, similar to like maybe even the Nicholas Asted bust with the King Jack, right? It's probably too high risk of a situation for a player that good to take this close spot, right? And I think she's in that class where she's too good, and this is maybe a spot that she passed on. So the question is, how do you defend it correctly? I think call is good, actually. I think my preferred play is call, because when you call, as long as you're keeping all your traps in there, right? Your sets, your straights, your two pairs, like anything like that. As long as you're just check calling those a decent amount, like, he's going to have to just shut down river. He can't just like YOLO bluff every river. Because, like, when you think about if he is bluffing turn, right? What is he doing now with a flush draw? Well, generally, solver doesn't want to have a flush draw because it blocks some of the draws that, could be there. So it puts him in a tough position when you check call. And if she did, I think she would have had something in the neighborhood of like 25 million left had she not made the play. So again, like, I guess it's such a unique spot because you can look at it as either equity denial, which is essentially under a value bet, right? Where it's like denying equity. That's a value bet. You think you have the best hand. Or a bluff, which is trying to get ace-x off. I think the dangerous part about trying to get ace-x off is the texture of the board. There's like a 3 straight already there, and there's 2 flush draws, right? So an ace is going to like, I think an ace is often going to find like, man, I beat so many combos here. She can have so many bluffs. He's going to give her credit for those. And I think he makes a crying call with any ace that he bets.
Wow.
If he has an ace that he doesn't plan to bet, first, I don't think he bets that size with one of those ace hands. And the ace hands that he is going to bet that size, I think he's calling. Like, I don't know that she has enough fold equity against the hands that beat her. So if she's only getting worse hands to fold or equity to null, yeah, there's value in that, right? Like, let's say he did bet a flush draw, he picked up spades or something. Like, yeah, there's value in that. But I think overall, and again, this is simply because I think for a lot of players, I'd say, yeah, go for it, right? But my sort of exploit there would be you're too good, right? Like you specifically with that stack are deadly, right? And this is a really thin spot. Like this is a very, very close spot in a very, very, she even said so. It was a really close spot. So close that I think, I don't know if she's looked at it or thought about it. In the moment, she said she was fine with her call. I wonder like now, if she still looks back and thinks, she would have done it. Cause yeah, if I was your coach and she's asking me what to do in that spot, I'd say just call and then fold river.
The final table of the main event is always interesting, right? You get this huge amount of players to distill down to 9 and some of the stories that you see and who makes it and the different range of characters that you end up seeing at the final table. This year, no different. We had 3 OG tournament poker grinders and Jonathan Tamayo, the eventual winner, Brian Kim, Joe Searock, we mentioned, online poker legend Nicholas Asted, who's Lena 900. He's been crushing online tournaments for forever. And I'm just happy to be here, Rake, and Jordan Griff, who ends up finishing second, which was a great story. Fun to watch him play. Brian Kim's hand was interesting as well. And I thought this hand, people are like, oh, what's he doing in this spot? That's insane. But, when we always talk about, okay, well, you're going to do this some X% of the time, this X% of the time with this hand, and these are blockers. I thought this was a real interesting hand to choose, that he chose to use in this situation. And Terrence, you want me to set it up? Do you want to do it?
I mean, you could read the hand.
Sure. So
you got
Angela,
that.
he raises it up to 4.6 on the button. He opens on the button for 4.6. And Kim 3-bets to 11.8 with king of clubs, 6 of clubs in the small blind. Nicholas Astet's in the big blind. He finds 2 10s in this spot. He thinks, and he cold 4-bets to 18 million out of the big blind. Angela folds, and then Kim goes into the tank and 5-bets all in for 54 million. Astet not super happy, but he ends up making a call with the 2 10s. So I guess that's really obviously the run out, whatever Astet wins. But the real interesting point there obviously is the 5-bet shove with that specific hand. And he's got a king for removal. I know they're talking about having a 6 of clubs removal, but now that takes away from ace 5, ace 4, those kind of combos that he doesn't have a 4, 5, 6, so he unblocks those. Did you think it was interesting in the moment, Daniel? Did you see this hand?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually spoke to Brian about the hand later, and I actually think we can do 2 things. We can go over the actual theory behind it, but ultimately what this came down to was a live read that was slightly off. Okay, so he picked up something clearly on Nicholas that he was like pondering something, right? Not a clear cut situation, not an obvious. So he thought there was some hesitancy. And I think, even Nicholas mentioned something about, he looked at my cards a few more extra times, right? So we'll get to that. But so the first part, the 3-bet with king 6 clubs is totally fine. You can actually probably do all 3 there, and he even said, it's a mix of fold or 3-bet. I have no problem with 3-bet. Now when you're 4-bet and, you sort of were touching on this, Adam, like the 4-bet bluffs are ace 4, ace 5 type hands. He doesn't have an ace. He doesn't have 4. So he unblocks all the bluffs with the king 6. And like you said, the king has some card removal because it blocks king, king, and ace, king, right? So as a hand class, it's actually, if your read is right, that this guy's going to be ace 4, ace 5 suiting enough, it's probably a pretty good hand class to do it with once you've already 3-bet. Like having the king 6 is probably decent, Obviously, you'd much rather have king, queen of clubs or king, jack of clubs, but he didn't. Ultimately, what you got to respect, I think, personally, is a guy willing to go for it there. Now, I wouldn't have, right? That's just not my style. I don't 5-bet king six. If I 5-bet you, I promise you, I have it. Okay. But Brian goes for it.
You're the guy we're supposed to 5-bet with king six.
Yes, I'm the.
That's the thing, right? Like, that's the thing.
So, and honestly, like Nicholas makes he snap calls with like tens, right? I'm like, man, I'd be kind of worried. Obviously, not necessarily folding, but goddamn, like that's a scary spot. And I think with 7 left too, I think Brian as well. I go back to that same sort of theory, which is I think Brian's too good, to take that spot. But again, I also have utmost respect and trust in what he saw. Like he flat out, this was the main driver behind the 5-bet was 100% live. This isn't him just going, oh, let me look at a randomizer and I have to 5-bet this king six sometimes. It had nothing to do with that. Like Brian is a high level player who came from the cash game world, who also, learned to play tournaments as well. And he combines a really in-depth knowledge of game theory with streets. He can play in the streets. That was a street poker hand. Now, a lot of, anybody calling it a punt, if Nicholas had ace 4 suited, ace 5 suited, which he can, by the way, he could, he would have done that, then, he looks like he's crushing, right? So
might have folded 9s,
and
right?
Like bottom line is he got in against 10s. King 6 suited, in the history of poker, has beaten 10s before, right? I've never done it, but it happens.
It's
only like a 2-1 dog.
Well, you have to actually put all your money in.
That's why I'm saying I've never
for it to happen.
I always have 10s. Like 10. Somebody else.
You're the guy crying calling with 10. All right, fine.
Oh shit! I guess I have to flip with you.
Yeah. It's funny. Your thoughts are exactly the same as a tweet I was going to read by another $10 million winner, Mark Jacobson, who said, whether you think it was a punt or not, you can't not respect a man who goes with his read on the biggest stage and being able to conduct this level of detachment right after. That's elite mindset. And yeah, so beyond the theory of, Daniel broke down the theory, he mentioned a thing, and you're reminded of the line in Rounders where Mike McDee says, I want him to think that I'm pondering a call, but I'm really thinking about Vegas and the fucking Mirage. Brian Kim looked at Nicholas Adstedt and said, this is a man who is not pondering Vegas and the fucking Mirage. He is actually making a decision. He doesn't have aces. He doesn't have kings, even queens or jacks, ace, king. You don't really have to think about whether you should 4-bet when it goes button small blind.
Well, yeah. Sorry to interrupt real quick, but he did his live was correct because Nicholas did have a decision. His decision was, do I 4-bet this or do I jam? So he was right about the read. Right. It was the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So if so he realized that he happened to unfortunately he made the right read, but on the wrong, Nicholas just has the exact wrong hand for this hand to fail again.
So I guess the way to describe it is he read genuine hesitation with a hand that genuinely required hesitation. Just the reasoning for the hesitation was he was between sizes, not between whether to do it or not.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the hand looks even better. Daniel just finished talking about Kristen's too good to make this high variance play. I mean, you could make the same argument about Lena as well, right? What part of the thought process from Brian Kim was this guy is considered one of the GOATs, if not the GOAT, of online tournament no limit hold'em poker. He's not going to want to flip. He's not going to want to risk it all pre-flop unless he has the nuts. And if I know that he doesn't have the nuts, there's a good chance
he's come from a world that he's going to do what needs to be done. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Certain players that come from the world, this needs to be done. And he plays, 20 tables online. It's this is the play. I'm making the play. I'm not, and again, the
that's true.
Bust out hand is another example of that, right? Because you can make the same argument, bro, you're too good. You've got an amateur and, and a grinder.
I think you're right. The online guys don't believe in you're too good for stack preservation. They're I'm going to push this edge. I'm going to push this edge because that's the way they've been trained.
Yeah, I like it.
I've been trained.
They're going to do what needs to be done. That's how they say it too, This is what needs to be done. I'm doing it. I'm not going to play scared, right? The other end of that spectrum is someone like myself or a Helmuth, right? Who's oh, never take these spots, and you give up a lot. You give up something when you don't, right? And, they're going to stick to what they believe in and take that sort of Jonathan Jaffe approach, which is, you're going to go broke at some point, right? Just make the right play on the way to doing it. And he's going to make the play that is correct in his mind. And,
What I've really learned from this, though, is if you're ever at the final table of the World Series of Poker with Daniel Negreanu and you have the blockers, you fucking ship it on his ass.
Yeah, come on.
Because he's probably going to fold it.
That's fine. Yeah, I fold. Till I don't.
Till I don't. Nicholas was
Like
funny.
that's why you have the
I don't
blockers.
know if you guys caught the interview or a interview with Nicholas, but he was talking about people were saying, "Oh, it's day 8. I'm exhausted. I can't believe I have to do this." And he's like, "Dude, I played 20 tables at a time for a month and a half all day. Like this
That was
is
epic.
nothing."
That was so epic.
Piece of
Yeah,
It is a piece.
that was absolutely epic. He was like, "This is nothing compared to playing like Scoop for 45 days in a row or whatever." Like, and it's true. And that's the kind of
I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying in terms of like the mental grind, but there's also the added difference of when you're playing the main, there's eyes on you. The spectacle is unlike, what it is online. You know what I
the
mean?
adrenaline's a little different.
You're playing online. You don't have every poker player in the world scrutinizing every one of your decisions. It's different.
Sure.
I mean, some people crumble. I don't think he's one of those people. Like I said, he's a guy that's going to do what needs to be done, but it's a different kind of difficulty but he's right. Obviously playing 20 tables for a month straight is like breaks your brain. Like, I mean, I don't know how he does it.
Think about the massive advantage he had at that final table. I mean, Tamayo to a much less extent, but Jordan Griff for sure, right? Because he's been in that situation of down to a final table in a tournament so many times that he is familiar with runouts, like how everything works, how it goes, the cadence of a final table. And Griff is just like, like this. He finishes third, and that's what's great about poker. The recreational guy beat the legend, like just because of the way it happened. And but if you
what I saw, because I have it on in the background on one of my TVs, every time I look up on the TV, he has a set. Am I wrong in that? Like he just always had
threes. It was always a set of threes too. Yeah.
How many sets did he have in the final?
Oh, so many.
Does anyone count them?
Yeah, a lot. But it was just fun to watch, and he ran good for sure. But, again, that's what's great about poker. So let's talk about Lena's bust-out hand. We mentioned it earlier. He raises on the button to $8 million with King of Spades, Jack of Diamonds. Jordan Griff, 3 bets to $28 million in the small blind with the black nines. And Aztec calls. The flop comes 10-9-3 with 2 diamonds. And Aztec, he flops gutter with 2 overs. Griff bets $28 million, about half pot there. And Aztec calls, and the jack rolls off the turn. So now Nicholas turns top pair, three straight out there, obviously. Action card. Griff, who is slightly taking over the chip lead now, he moves all in for $160 million, and Aztec goes into the tank, and he makes the call and finds out he's drawing to the 3 out or the 4 outer there for a straight, and he bricks it off, and he ends up finishing third. And you were talking about earlier saying, did he need to take this spot? But pretty hard when check raise that flop and here comes the jack of the turn. Now, if Griff has ace 10, is he jamming the turn?
No.
It seems like unlikely. Yeah. So why is he calling here on the turn, I guess is the question.
Well, he's calling because what he's doing is he's thinking that, Griff is going to have a lot of combo draws here. The ace-king suited, the ace-queen suited, the flush draw, straight draw type things, right? There are no value hands. If Griff has value, there are 0 value hands that Nicholas beats. King Jack is not ahead of any value range. I think I heard him say something about, him not thinking these were over pairs. They might have been more afraid or whatever. But again, this is kind of like a spot where, in Nicholas's mind, he did say he's a wild one, a little more difficult to play against in these spots. But it's, again, a spot where he's going with, do what needs to be done, where I probably say, listen, if I'm going to play a 300 million chip pot against the amateur, right, on 9-10 jack with flush draw, probably going to have better than top pair, personally, right? Again, I think he just, he's always trying to make what he thinks is the right play in the moment, and maybe less so, trying to small ball it, if you will, because, like, that's how I would approach, anytime, you have an amateur, you figure that they're going to make the majority of their mistakes on turns and rivers. So, you want to tread more carefully. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he said since, but I wouldn't went with the hand because here's the problem, right? If he has the hands that you want him to have, he might have ace queen suited, right? In a flush draw. That's a lot of outs. That's an ace, a king, an 8, a diamond. That's your best case, or the queen, that's your best case scenario. That's not that good. That's still going to have, I don't know, 30-something% equity. That's your best case. Your worst case is you dead. You have, 3-4 outs tops. And, again, because I don't think there's any worse value hands there ever. I just think it's, I would lean fold. I mean, no, I wouldn't lean. I would jump on fold.
If Griff has a 3-bet range that looks like what you expect an amateur who's 3-handed in the main event of the World Series of Poker, like if he has the range that you would think that's what it's supposed to look like, then the call is terrible. Because again, like as Daniel pointed out, the absolute worst you're up against is like a combo draw that has a shit ton of outs, and a ton of the time you're just stone dead or in very, very bad shape. Now, what we ended up seeing during the heads up portion of this, or at least what I ended up seeing, was Griff was not scared. Daniel mentioned, you want to try to play small ball against these amateurs. They're going to make bigger mistakes on the turn and river. But Griff played in such a way that he didn't allow anybody to play small ball against him. He played very good like defense against small ball. He was inflating pots. He was 3-betting a lot. And here we see it just now. He's pushing 160 million into this pot that had like 80K in it on the turn or something like that. Like he was denying small ball. And so it's much more defensible in a way. I probably wouldn't make the call either. Like, I feel like you're sort of crushed against the range that he's quote unquote supposed to have. But it's much more defensible when you think like, oh, does he just have like ace deuce sometimes here? Like, does he just have like complete random fucking like king 8, like just this stuff. But I don't think he really does at this stage. I think once it got to heads up, he was much more willing to just be loose and just be like, all right, I got 6 mil locked up. I don't care. But I think it probably at this point, Griff's range is probably narrow enough. It's condensed enough that when you have king jack, you just don't have very much equity against this draw. Like you're again at the best, in the best case, like a 65-35 favorite. And sometimes you just have 10% or less.
Yeah. So against the entire range, you factor, so you have like 65% equity when you're ahead, and when you're not, you often have close to 0. Yeah. So when you do that calculation, and you start to count like, the bluffs, like he needs to have, like you said, Terrence, he needs to have like a really, really out there, like ace deuce, king 8 type shit. He needs to have those like a lot, right? And listen, I'm not saying he can't, but is he going to have it at a GTO clip? I doubt it. I think most people in that spot are going to be under bluffing, right? So if you factor that in as an exploit, he's already going to be under bluffing. The range, even the bad part of his range, often just has 2 pair. Like, and you're okay against that, but you still need help. So yeah, I think like, I would be surprised if he looks back on that and says he wouldn't do that differently, but I don't know.
Tamayo goes on to beat Jordan Griffin, be our champion. There was some controversy, and there's lots of talk on Twitter about the final table, and specifically about Tamayo's rail, who is made up of primarily of Joe McKeon, past champion in the main event. Of course, the year Daniel went deep, and Dominic Nietzsche, who owns a training site, I believe. And they were on his rail, and they had laptops on the rail, and they were running hands in between hands. And Tamayo was over having a look at the solves, and they had everything up, and people caught photos of it, and they've been disseminated on Twitter, and there's a lot of discussion about, is this against the rules? Yeah. And from what I can tell, the rules aren't super specific for this year. They were for last year. It seemed like, I don't know if they deleted a rule or not. However, they did say out loud an announcement before all the tournaments, and I'll quote this, and I think, Ross, you might have the sound drop, or should I read it out? Do you have it, Ross?
We do ask you to please do not use any type of poker solvers at any point in time at the table or in the tournament area. If you're found using one of these poker solvers, there's a possibility of being disqualified from this tournament.
So that's pretty specific, right? We do not. We ask you to not use any type of poker solvers. There's a possibility of being disqualified from this tournament. Not you will be disqualified. There's a possibility. So they're leaving it up to interpretation or discretion of who's currently on the floor, I guess. But I think at the end of the day, we all agree that this is really bad for optics, for casual players, for what poker's turning into. I need a team. I need to know all the solvers to be able to go to the final table and win, specifically because Tamayo won. So I don't know. I think this is horrible for poker. I think we need to do something to stop this from happening and take it back to, hey, a bunch of guys having fun. Now, obviously, it's for $10 million and it's going to be serious. But to take this away from being a team sport to individual. Terrence, first, what did you make of all that?
There's a lot to dive into. First, I want to say that I thought it's really unfortunate that this has become the story of the main event final table, because when I was watching it live and the final, like in heads up, I found myself cheering for Tamayo. He seemed like a cool enough guy. Like, he gave a really nice speech at the end. Even McKeon gave a really nice speech, which really blew my mind. And he seemed like still seems like a really likable guy. And then the social media machine started to get into play. You had the little short clips of him going over and Dom and Joe, showing him, like, put him in the laptop and, oh, we gotta find out whether we're going 2.1 or 2.3, or we're gonna 3-bet jam ace 4 off as a threshold or ace 3 off. I mean, that's generally the thought we're getting at. So it feels like it's really, tainted this win for him. And I don't feel that it's like tainted him, but the shine and the story that's coming off of it is that, this guy, had the F1 team and, this poor outclassed amateur, it was taken advantage of. And I think that's a false narrative, because people have been coaching from the sidelines for forever. Just that now there's a bit more brazenness to it. We have a lot more powerful tools about it. The problem is I'm not exactly sure. I'm still not sure what should be done, because as long as we allow coaching on the rail to some degree, there's always going to exist the possibility that someone somewhere, whether they're in the building or not, is going to be able to relay information to somebody on the rail, right? We had that before. If you remove this to 7 or 8 years ago, if I ever made the final table of the main event, I would sure as fuck have multiple people watching every hole card and dissecting strategies and feeding them to me as much as possible. Now we've got these solvers, which are much more powerful than that. I don't know how you defend against that, because even if you say, like, okay, you can't use any software. Okay, what if you have a guy on the rail that's just so good that he practically is a human solver? I mean, what if you have that? Can you go to that guy and ask him, hey, what am I opening with? What am I 3-betting with? What, we're about 55 big blinds deep. Like, should I be 3-bet jamming? Should I be 3-betting to this size, 4-betting this size? What exactly where are we going to draw the line? Because one thing in that rule that I really don't like is there's a possibility of you being disqualified from the tournament. It's not a good way to say that. We don't say, if you string raise, it's a possibility that you're going to be forced to make a call. We say, if you string raise, that's a call. We need to define very clearly so that everybody knows, and we need to close all these loopholes, what's okay and what's not. And I'm not sure exactly how to close these loopholes in a way that isn't just nobody in the audience is allowed to have a phone.
Okay. So I'm a little surprised that you don't see it as I think it's much easier than you think, frankly.
Okay.
First and foremost, right? Aside from WSOP rules, which did state beginning of tournaments, like you said, I think the one thing that needs to be addressed and fixed is the word possibility, saying you will get, you may get a penalty or DQ, right? Here's the issue. It is 100% what they did against Nevada gaming law, like actual law. It is illegal to use any sort of software or betting aid to help you with betting strategies in a casino in Las Vegas. They broke that law. Like, there's no definition you come up with where they didn't break that law. Now, is that law going to be enforced? Is there going to be any legal ramifications? I don't think so, and I hope not, right? Because hopefully we can handle this internally. I do think overall that it's sort of a good thing that this happened when it did. And I don't ever want to rake this kid over the holes, because I think, like, he was just, like, in the moment, like he sort of said, like, I'm just playing, man. They're just telling me what to do, and I'm just playing. You mentioned something, Terrence, like, is it okay if you have a coach in the rail who's giving you specific strategies from his brain? Yes. Yes, it is, because coaching's always been allowed in that regard, right? What you can't do, or what the rule should state going forward, is there is absolutely no use of any poker aid software or charts inside the tournament area, which is defined by the entire, facility. In addition to that, underneath that, you put what does solver use entail? That means getting a text message from somebody using it and using it. So here's the thing. The edge you get from this, I think we all agree, is kind of minimal, right? Like Jonathan didn't need to know 2.1. It's like gives him a small little advantage, right? Now you're going to ask yourself, is it worth that advantage to risk, if the penalty is severe, being DQ'd from the tournament, right? So just the simple threat of saying, if you get caught doing this, now you're right. There's always going to be people that try to do this or find loopholes, right? But having in place a much more clear rule, as you said, Terrence, not, possibility, but this is it. This is like not okay. I also think, though, it's really important to have discretion here. I think really important. I'll tell you why. So if Dominic Niche is doing this, knowing the rules, he should get the full letter of the law because he knows better, right? When Arkansas Jim, who just bought GTO Wizard, right? He's looking at it and he's playing on his phone and he's playing a 1500 and he's like punching in a thing. He doesn't. This is a guy you give a warning to. So sorry, sir, you can't use those in the tournament area. That is a poker raid, whatever, right? Okay. If he uses it again, you give him a 2-round penalty or whatever the case may be. But I think like the issue or the tough part of this was laptops have been on the rail for 10 years. They have. But what's been on those laptops has been the stream. This is the first year where they're crunching numbers in real time to update stack sizes to give you opening sizes and range adjustments with the big blind ante, right? And they're, that doing that in real time. Now, real-time assistance, right? He called me a moron, Dominic, for saying this, I'm so shocked by his response to all this. He went the completely wrong way. Instead of being apologetic to the black stain that it is on poker, he's like, screw you all, bro, nerds rule, Like, okay, cool, congrats. But, damn, I lost my train of thought there.
You're talking about RTA.
Yeah, RTA, right. So there's varying degrees of RTA. Obviously, the most egregious version is you're literally using a solver to tell you what to do in each hand. But it's also RTA to do this. You're under the gun, Terrence, the very next hand, right? You have 8 bigs. You look on your phone and you literally get the answer and exactly what you should do. And then you use that information in real time. That is a mild version of real-time assistance because it's going to help you on the very next hand. Very mild, right? But
it is. I just don't like using the same word for two things because I think it creates I think if people start throwing around RTA, it diminishes what RTA abuse really does look like, which is obviously like we know in the online world is like guys literally on the flop, turn and river, punching into the solver and figuring out like that's a much different animal than what was happening.
Sure.
So I don't like using the same term for both of these.
And I get why. I do it to sort of, because it's accurate, because it's true, obviously, like I said, and to show that there are varying degrees. And to point out that this is like giving the person, and again, you could say, well, coaching does that too, right? Sure. But coaching comes from human beings. Coaching comes from the minds. Like me telling you, Terrence, watch out. Adam's got to tell. When he blinks 3 times, he's bluffing. Like, make sure, you do this against him. That's strategic talk. That's what you do, when a boxer is, in between rounds, his coach is telling him stuff like that. It's a very different thing than actually getting like something directly from AI solver use or like specifically, like pre-flop charts or anything like that. So I think as long as we're clear that it's not just a possibility, you will get a penalty, you'll get but in the tournament discretion, TD discretion, no solver use whatsoever. And that was already sort of the rule because we went into the World Series. Remember that time there was a guy at the table before the series started and he was using, something at the table and people were like, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And there was a big brouhaha. So this came up, right? And we're like, well, how do we handle this, going forward? And, it's all new, right? It's all something we have to tackle and deal with in the future. But I do think we can. And I think we can do so quickly by simply making it very, very clear that it's not to be tolerated. This isn't good look. It's not okay. And, I've heard far too many Rex and other people say, man, I would have played the minimum, but this turns me off of playing. Because nobody wants to feel like, Jordan too, like guy's an amateur, right? And now not only is he playing against, Jonathan, who specifically said he could not have won without Dom. He said this. I couldn't have won without Dom and Joe. Well, Dom was using a solver like in real time. So his help was giving him, solver use. Like from Jordan's perspective, like, or any amateur, like I'm playing against a pro who's got a team who's using solvers and computers to beat me. What chance do I have? And that's the narrative we don't want to come away with, which is why I think very aggressively, making this rule, if anything, on the too aggressive side rather than the passive side until people start to get the message, And again, but you're right, Terrence, like, listen, people are always going to try the earpiece or something like that, and cheat. That's poker. People always cheat, but we can still put in rules to, punish those that do.
So one thing I want to talk about the Dominic thing, which is I do agree with you very strongly on one thing, was that I think his sort of social media, whatever you want to call this, over the last week has been tremendously unproductive. I feel like, Tamayo, I don't know what kind of relationship, whether it's a friend relationship or just a purely a coach-client relationship. I feel like the way that he's behaved has taken so much shine off of John Tamayo's accomplishment. And if I were John Tamayo, I'd be super pissed at Dom for doing this, because this was supposed to be his moment.
When everybody in the community is telling you, Dom, listen, everyone, unanimously, nobody's going, you got a point. Like, chill out. Come from an apologetic perspective, say, okay, well, we were unsure, like, blah, blah, blah. But
I'm not even sure he needs to be apologetic, to be honest. Like, I don't think he necessarily, because it's not 100%, like, we were sort of in uncharted territory. I don't even know that Dom needs to make an apology, but he doesn't need to go off and say, and what he's doing is he's promoting his brand and his product at the expense of, and it's taking the shine off of Jonathan Tamayo's win. And the story should be about him. And if you coach someone to victory, sure, you absolutely deserve the credit for that. But you don't he's made it so much about himself and his battle against these Luddites who are afraid of technology and all of this stuff. It's not about you, bro. Like, it just feels like such a tremendous disservice. I do feel like I do want to talk a little bit about the phones at the table stuff, and so it's a much more implication, because the main event, the final table main event, I think we can control the stuff. There's so many eyeballs on it. It's easy. I want more about the stuff of what's allowed at the table. Like, are you allowed to, like you said, okay, if I'm under the gun, I shouldn't be able to look at snap shove and say, okay, it's whatever, ace deuce offsuit or better, king seven offsuit or better, blah, 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 and then memorize that and then play perfect strategy the very next hand. Can I run over to the rail and do that? Can I run out of the room and do that? Again, can I, you talked about receiving a text message from somebody else who has access being equivalent. Can I text the hand that I just finished playing to my buddy who's got a solver and say, like, I played this hand? Is it correct? Like, and how do we enforce this stuff? Because we can't just have people walking around looking at people's phones and saying, like, this guy's looking at a solver, we got to give this guy a penalty. Like, who are these phone police going to be?
You're right. And that's partly why, like, everyone's like, well, why didn't Jack see it? I mean, like, you can't, like, we can't Gestapo everybody's phone and say, let me see what's on your phone. But I think, like, what you were saying is, can you do this? I think when you are in the industry and you sell a product in this environment, right, it is upon you to say, you know what? This is gray. You know why I know it's gray? Because all these tools are illegal online. I'm not allowed to use these tools when I play online. So why would I think they are live? So you know what you do if you're responsible and you don't want to grade any shadiness? You go to the floor and you say, hey, floor, we got our laptop up. Is it okay if we give him, ranges as the stacks update? Make sure it's clear. That would have ended it. That would, like, first of all, wouldn't have happened. The other thing too, as a community, we as players, really the only way people get caught is when we catch it. You can't expect in a 1,000 player tournament, right, 6 floor men to be watching everybody's phones, like you said. So when you do see something, you call it out. I was surprised that Nicholas or, Big Bird, I found out he did know. He sort of knew they were doing stuff. It was just like he didn't want to make a big stink about it or whatever. But when you do, you say something and alert the floor. But again, back to the thing with Dom, it's like he says, this is not how the law works. I didn't know about the announcements. I wasn't here. That's not how the law works. The announcements were made. It's upon you to know the rules, right? You go to the floor, you're doing something that everybody and their grandmother would know is on the line, right? You got to know it's at least gray. And that's where you go to the floor and say, listen, here's what we're doing. Is this okay? And then you have no issues. If they give you the okay and say this is fine, then you're not in the right. If they say no, it's a no. Bro. You can't do this online. You can't use any of this stuff.
I just worry that next year it is going to be just a guy with an earpiece to somebody else who's off property, because it's basically in defense. Like, there's no way around it. If I have an earpiece and I'm the coach of this guy and
I just think
the guy running us over the back, there is just no way anybody's ever going to catch me.
But the thing is, it's worth so little. So it really is. It's worth so little. Because, like, first of all, especially against an amateur, like, you don't need to have GTO ranges against an amateur. That's silly. right? It's just dumb. Like that's not the best way to play the guy. And it's fine, but it's like not necessarily like optimal against, a player who's going to make mistakes.
You just need to exploit him. That's all.
Exploit him. So now you have to say, okay, will there be egregious people who try to do this, and like, then ask the question, like, how much is it even worth? Like, here's the difference. It's like, it's not like in chess where if you cheated like this, you just win, right?
Yeah.
Like if I had a chess engine in my ear, you can't beat. Poker's not like that. Okay. So they're going to make slightly better decisions here and there if they cheat, but like at what cost? This isn't something that's like easy to do. And second of all, the value of it is so.
I don't know. It might be like 15 BB 100.
You're going to also have
what if you're not playing an amateur? What if you happen to be like heads up at the final table with like an elite end boss?
Let's say
that'd be worth what?
To pull this off, Terrence, how many thinking people you need? Like 3, 4 maybe? What do you think? 3, 4.
How many? What's the question?
So how many people? Let's say, for example, we're going to pull this off with the earpiece. We're going to have a guy. Like how many man team would have to be in on this? You think? Like 2 at least?
Yeah, bro. You'd probably have to have at least 3. Yeah.
Let's 3 or 4. So now you have to trust too that you're going to do this minimal edge, and none of these 4 guys are going to squeal. No one's going to say anything.
True.
You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
okay, you really want to risk your reputation for that? Like, okay, go for it. But like,
I don't know, when people are playing for 10 million, I don't think people care that much about reputation. I'll be honest. Like
some people, sure, yeah. I don't disagree.
Imagine, given that the World Series said you may face disqualification, and Dom and Joe are on the rail with laptops. Imagine if one of the floor men just said, "Yeah, you're disqualified. Yeah, I see. We announced it. I see you using tools here. You're disqualified. Not you finished 7th. You're disqualified at the final table at the main event. Can you imagine? That would be,
yeah. I think the rules
would be a lawsuit that would last a long time.
Because the rules were not. You're right on this, Terrence, too, big time. The rules were not clearly stated, written, right? So the announcement was made, but it was too vague.
But to your point, the Nevada Gaming Commission has a rule. They're in Nevada. Right. They're in a gaming place.
Well, if Nevada Gaming came in and said you're banned, then you have no recourse.
Right. But the first layer is the World Series rules, right? Like World Series rules is sort of the first layer. Nevada Gaming is.
If there happened to be a Nevada Gaming agent at the final table, he saw what they were doing. He could literally call the police, like legit, have them removed and eliminated. I mean, that sounds crazy.
He won't. Like the World Series is going to be.
I'm saying in theory, because that definitely, you read that rule, what they have in state. It's generally for casino play, but it doesn't specifically say casino play, so it encompasses all forms of gambling that happen within a casino, and you cannot use any betting aid that helps you with betting strategies.
Well, hopefully we get some clarification coming up, not before next year, but before, soon, because we've got major tournaments happening all over the place. We're going to talk about Bahamas real quick. I know we're running along, but let's do a little bit of cleanup here at the World Series of Poker. We talked a lot about the Crossbook before the World Series of Poker, Jeremy Becker versus Landon Tice, and all the different wagering that yourself and Berkey and lots of other poker players had on this matchup. And
I believe Ross won this Crossbook. Ross's result was the best.
Yeah, Ross beat both of these guys. Jeremy lost less than Landon Tice, specifically about 71,000 less. So he takes down the title, I guess it is, of this Crossbook. But it was a sweat, right? I think it went all the way, and Jeremy actually, I think, went deep in one of the last events and could have been really put the hammer down pretty hard, but ended up busting out. Daniel, you were vindicated. Your man performed better, let's say, than Landon did.
I'll tell you the truth. When we were discussing how much we thought this bet was worth, we had it at 108,000. That's what I genuinely thought. We were going to rate to win 108,000. So I don't think we ran well. He won 71, which is good. But listen, both players obviously ran bad because, listen, it's hard to have a winning summer. Just more often than not, you're going to have a losing summer. I think there was some, and listen, most of the rules were just like, whatever you guys want to do, right? There was one aspect of the rules that sort of made high buy-ins kind of not worthwhile. Because here's the problem, right? You could play 10Ks, but there's a 250K cap on a 10K, right? So what you're essentially doing is, I'll tell you this. If you want, I'll any 25K and up, for example, I'll book anybody in the world, anybody.
With the 250.
And the cap is 250K. Yeah. The most they can win is 10 buy-ins, right? Like with that cap, what it did was it made all the 10Ks minus EV for both of them. So the only way in which it made sense to play the 10Ks, frankly, is if they both played. And if one played, the other one is actually benefiting from not playing because it's a negative ROI thing. So I think like, the cap kind of, made sure that like the buy-ins that they played were smaller. Like they're going to play buy-ins that just have a much higher ROI, like the other properties, the 600s, the 1Ks and stuff like that. So it made it more of like an uneventful thing because really there was no big score. I think the biggest score was like 28K. And I think that was Landon's. But overall, I think it didn't live up to the hype. I think that was a big part of the reason was there just wasn't a lot of incentive to play 5K, 10K buy-ins when, like, just think about it. It's like, imagine it's like playing a tournament where you just take an extra, let's say the first prize is $1 million, you're taking like 1.5 million out of the prize pool. Like that's too much, to make it worthwhile.
And then player of the year, Scott Seaver ends up winning the player of the year. Thank God he won 3 bracelets, and almost won a 4th. So good thing he did. And, he didn't win it. He won by 500 points or so, or 600 points, but Jeremy Osmus was there, Michael Rocco. And in number 10, which was great to see, was Phil Ivey, who was back grinding the World Series of Poker. I think everybody enjoyed it, winning his 11th bracelet. Is that right? I think he was 11, right? Yeah. So
I think this player of the year, I think you saw so many people thankful and happy about the change. Scott Seaver flat out said, this is the reason I played so many events. Jeremy Osmus was in the mix. And look at the top 10. Look at that. Rattle off those names, right? The only person that didn't like this was Sean Dean. Because frankly, Sean Dean didn't even, I doubt he had, I don't think he did well. He best he had as an 8th. But under the old system, he might have won because he had something like 30 cashes, right? I'm not kidding. Like he may have actually just won the whole thing, which would have been silly. Like I remember speaking to Sean beforehand and you know what he said? He's like, the problem with this new thing is it's going to be really hard to beat anybody who wins 2 bracelets. It should. It should be hard.
2 bracelets is a big deal.
You drop stacks in every tournament, so you beat a guy with 2 bracelets. It should be hard. Now you look at what Jeremy did. He was only 500 points off. Jeremy had like 8 final tables. Like
a new record, right? For final tables.
Or something like that. And, he didn't have a single win, but he was still in there because his resume was so cool. And I think a lot of guys were looking at the resume a little more like in depth now. Because now there's strategy. You're like, well, okay, what is my 10th cash? How many points did I get for that? How can I improve upon that? I don't know about the online thing. Like 1 counted. I think you could make the argument. Maybe you could expand that to 3 because there are some high buy-in ones and there's no reason really not to. But, the 1, what it did was it certainly made people play less online. Like I didn't play nearly as much online as I would have, but I think that's also a net benefit for the World Series too, because it's sort of, and that's part why we took it out of the 25K fantasy. We took the online events. And I think most people are just like, you know what? I don't want to have to be in a 25K 6 max while also the $400 deep stack.
Well, I feel like it was just a response to Ian Matikas winning last year. Like,
yeah, a big part of it.
Off the strength of the online events and people being like, who's that? I don't know who that is. Yeah. And it turns out he won like every online event last year.
Yeah, I think 1 is too extreme. I think you could have just said 3 and that would have been fine. But overall, I mean, look at the race. Like, I mean, what? You got John Racner, you had Phil Ivey, you had like all these crushers. Like the list was littered with like, a lot. And it was competitive. It really was. It came down to the wire. Like, even though Scott won 3 bracelets, this isn't something that was like, foregone conclusion. Like I would have thought, frankly, that anyone wins 3, they're like a lock, but it wasn't the case. Like if Jeremy would have binked the last online tournament, he could have passed them.
Question. Scott Seaver was not the number 1 point getter in the 25K fantasy. So everybody agrees that he should have been World Series Poker Player of the Year. And arguably like it would have been a travesty if he wasn't. He is actually 3rd in the 25K fantasy. Osmus won under that format. Is there a thought of changing 25K fantasy to do a similar thing where you're capping the number of results?
No, not at all. For 2 reasons. Number 1, it's just like a draft situation. And the whole thing about, I think people get the misconception about 25K is like that it's not equitable, right? It's not supposed to be. It's a gamble, right? The idea is to increase variance and make like different strategies viable, right? So it's not to say like, okay, in some cases, a guy who finished 80th gets 100 points and a guy who won a bracelet got 50 points. People look at that and go, that's not fair. But it's not unfair. What it does is it creates higher variance. The field bonuses do that, makes it a little more luck related. And that's a good thing. Generally speaking, when you think about games, right? The worst kind of games are the ones where there's no luck involved because guess what? The best player just wins. If I play chess against Ross, whoever's better just gets to win all the time. That's no fun, right? So with the 25K fantasy, which you don't want to have it set up where just like everyone thinks, well, there's 3-4 teams that are super sharp. We don't have a shot. You can fill your team. If you think field bonuses is the way to go, go ahead. fill your team with all the low limit grinders, see how you do. It's a high variance approach, but what it does is it makes more players viable. Originally, this draft was designed for mixed game players, high stakes mixed game players, because we knew them. We didn't know all these other guys. What we did was, because it got bigger, we expanded it because there was no value in taking any guys who played the small no limits at all. The field bonuses now gives them some value, right? So you're going to see a lot of spots where you go, this doesn't make sense, you know? But again, it's not about equitable. The person who has the most points, you know, in fantasy doesn't mean they had the best World Series, right? It just means they got the most damn points based on this, you know, whatever system that it is.
The 25K fantasy, quickly touching on it, the Dinkers team ended up taking it down. Daniel, our team's finished somewhat down the list here in 16th and 17th.
Oh, my side bets this year? Yeah, I think I won. I think it was a 5K bet your team had against your team, and that was it. We all lost every other side bet. You know, like 300. I think it was like 330K total on the side, but it's not all me because I sold, you know, more than half of it to the team and stuff like that. And we had a fun chat group, and I swear, I don't know, it was the weirdest World Series because everyone, because I have pieces of people here and there, right? Literally, I think it's a group of 8 people. Not a single one won this summer. Including me, man. And I won a $1.1 million bracelet event. I won $1.17 million, and I won a PPC, and I lost on the series because I went like, and this is what people don't get. I went like 0 for 8 or 10 in 50K plus buy-ins. So that's 2 250s, that's 500. 2 100s, that's 7. 5 or 6 50s, there goes the money. Poof. Where it'll go. And when you look at a sample size, what is 8-9 turbos essentially, right? Because it's like, you know, it's what they are. And so yeah, a lot of people have a misconception about what I guess, you know, a good or a bad World Series is. Obviously, you could just say, did you win money? Then it's a good World Series, you know. But that's not how most of us, I think, look at it. You know, we look at how many good results we put up. Obviously, you want to win money, but that's not like imagine you won 3 bracelets, right? In the 1,500 to 600, you won the $600 deep stack, you won the $1,500, you won $300, 3 bracelets, but you played the 250K, the 100K, and the 250Ks, and you brinked all those and you lost 300K. People say, how the fuck are you the player of the year? Right? Because, you know, we just have such a varying degree of buy-ins, it skews things.
Yeah, sure.
All right, one final.
How did Scott Skeever get drafted for $37? That's fucking ridiculous.
I don't know, man.
Nobody knew he was going to play. We didn't know.
He announced that he was going to play. He told the whole world he was going to play. Nobody believed him.
I deserved the result I got this year because I did the least amount of homework I've ever done in 25K fantasy. I did almost none. And then my strategy was completely derailed right off the bat because my goal this year, I'll say, you know what? For the first time ever, I'm going to take myself. And I'm going to take Josh. Me and Josh. We're going to go
for 130 or something.
I went for $131, and Josh went for 70 something. So I couldn't have even got us 2 alone.
Right.
And then I was like, all right, I'll take Jeremy Becker for $1, and then I'll fill out with some other dollar players that I got. Right. Well, they went crazy 130. Then Josh went for 73. So I'm like, all right. I pulled out my laptop and I go, shit, I got to get to work. I got to start texting people. Who the hell's playing? So I went with Old Faithful, the guy that I seem to get every year, Nick Schulman. But yeah, we didn't ice the team that we wanted to this year, but next year I'm going to put in work, and I'm not going to take myself because these people have gone nuts. They literally told me they were going to go 190. They were going to go all in on me. They're going to bid 193.
All right,
they were going nuts.
Hey, I think next year Seaver might have a shot of outpacing. I mean, Seaver's going to go for over 100 next year because next year is the year that he actually gets Poker Hall of Fame eligibility, and everybody saw what he did.
That depends on what he says he's going to do, right? Like we had. I know, but like look at Rob Mizrachi. He goes for like two. It's like the thing is, if you don't do your research on guys like him, I mean, when you get him that cheap, and then he's like, oh no, I'm playing everything. You're like, well, God, that's like insane value. You know what I mean? It's like That's the frustrating part sometimes about, not doing your homework when you're like, you miss guys like that and you don't bid on them and you're like, oh, like even Phil Ivey, my buddy Phil Ivey. I didn't even bother text him. He went for $16 freaking. $16 freaking. He played every day. Played all the big ones. He went for $16. He's worth more than that. I promise you.
Before Adam ends the show, what's Kid Poker doing for his 50th birthday?
Well, so we were going to do like party. Amanda's birthday's on the 7th. Mine is tomorrow, July 26th. we were going to do like a joint 50-40 thing. I'm not sure if we're going to do that. What we're going to do tomorrow, I think we're going to dinner. Got a group of like 8 to 10 of us, I think. Just going to do dinner, nothing crazy. I think for something like, if you want to go big, you got to really plan. We're just going to have a dinner, I think, at the resorts. Maybe we'll go to, oh shit, I shouldn't even tell people because they'll show up. We're going to go to dinner on the strip somewhere. Dude, we live in that world now, Don't tell people where you're going to go. You tell them
that's an easy edit. Ross can fix that one.
I don't know what the place was you were trying to say.
I know what it was placed because it's the place all the go.
Yeah.
I edited that out too. 2 quick things. Patrick Antonius becomes the 61st member of the Poker Hall of Fame. I don't think anybody would suggest that he doesn't deserve to be in there.
What a drama.
I haven't read the release in the past years, but this one said the Poker Hall of Fame traditionally elects 1 or 2 members annually. So I don't know. There's been a lot of talk. We need to start getting 2 people in. A whole bunch of people are going to turn 40 that deserve to be in there. So I'm not sure. Again, not sure if that was in there before, but I did notice that. And the final thing, the World Series of Poker Paradise was announced, Daniel, December 6th to 19th at the Atlantis in the Bahamas with the super main event, not just the main event. This is the super main event, $25K buy-in, $50 million guarantee in the middle of the Bahamas. For context, the main had $94 million. So, you're gonna have a whole bunch of people fly down there to try and chase an overlay, I'm sure. Danny, you're obviously pumped for that one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Normally, these people, they're so crazy with these guarantees and the numbers they come up with. And normally, I would look at this and say, there's no way in hell they'll get there. But actually now, you know what? I'm converted. And this might be the year they miss because I think they're going to get it. I think they're going to hit the guarantee. And I don't know if you saw, but there's also the partnership with Triton for the first time ever. The World Series is partnering with Triton. And they're going to bring one of their marquee events in a big way to the Bahamas, which is the Invitational, which is, half the field is businessmen and they get to invite a pro. And this year it's big. It's a $500K, it's $1 million buy-in for the team. So Ross, I'm wondering, I think you're going to qualify as a businessman. So if you want to put up the $1 million, I'll play for like 30% if that's cool.
No, don't take Daniel. Take me.
Got to make a couple more podcasts.
No, I do think it's a fun event. I do think a lot of people wonder well, how does someone qualify as a businessman? And there's a small group of people who make the decision. And sometimes they make decisions. You're like, wait a minute, Punat Punsri, that's a businessman, But here's the thing: just because someone's a businessman doesn't mean they can't be good at poker, right? Santosh will probably qualify as a businessman. He's been killing it. He won a high roller. He's doing really, really well. So it's an interesting wrinkle. I think it's a cool idea, cool concept. And I think it'll be really nice to have, sort of the Triton element there at the Bahamas this year, bringing all the high rollers. I think you're going to see every high roller that already plays Tritons, they're going to come out. It's very actually central in that the Canadians can play. They don't come and play in Vegas because of the tax issues. You've got the South Americans who also have tax issues. It's not that far from Europe. It's close to the East Coast, Florida, New York, all that stuff. Obviously, for those on the West Coast, it's a little bit of a trek. But overall, year one was can we do this? Right? Is this viable? There's some bumps and bruises along the way to, ironing out some of the details logistically, and now we've learned from it. And we're going to, make it even bigger and better next year and, or this year actually. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'll be bringing the vlogs back. Yeah, I guess businessman, I'm going to look for, I should be a businessman at this point. Look at me. I'm a freaking big time guy. I'm a business guy. Although I'll tell you what, part of me, I swear to you, and this is going to sound just like those 1-3 players who say, I got to move up to where they respect my raises, but I kind of feel safer playing against the pros. I really do. Because at least there, I know what the fuck I'm dealing with, You get the Rex in there and you're like, excuse me, what? What is this play? You got me, you know what I mean? It's it's kind of scary in a lot of ways. Not that that makes any sense. And I'm obviously kidding, but part of me isn't.
You've set me back so many years when people ask me that question. I play better against the pros. So now they're going to watch this and go, Daniel says so.
Yeah, now they're see, even Daniel says so. No,
exactly.
Yeah.
Good for you. You might play your first Triton, right? Is that your first Triton?
Yeah, I've never played a Triton. Imagine I will. Yeah, I'm going to look at the schedule.
There you
go. Yeah, hopefully it's a robust schedule. I'm hoping we have a mix of some PLOs and maybe this year. Last year we didn't have a mixed event. I'm hopeful this year I'm very hopeful this year there will be some form of a mixed event.
It's not the World Series of Poker if there's not some other.
I agree.
If we don't have a few mixed games, right?
Although, yeah, internationally they're just it doesn't draw as well. But
I mean, I played an 8-game tournament in Berlin in like 2012. Like,
let me ask you this, Terrence. Okay, let's say I put you in charge of World Series Bahamas. I'll ask you all. Let's say you get to put one mixed game tournament in. What's the buy-in? What's the format?
It's probably
game for sure.
Like 1,500.
Yeah, 2,500, 1,500 8-game.
Do you think a 1,500 or 2,500 if you're going to excite people enough at an expensive resort?
It's true.
High buy-ins?
Yeah,
you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it might not. I mean, but the thing is, it might not. But I do know the PCA used to just run like all of these like small buy-in tournaments, and like they would run them for like $300, $500, and they'd have like 6 of them going a day. Yeah. It's logistically a lot harder, but it's definitely like it's not like you would come out for just that, like an $800 8-game or whatever. But if there was like one every day and only a couple of them were bracelet events, you could probably do that.
What if you did this? What if you did something more along the lines of their different stratosphere, the bracelet event being a high buy-in, right?
Yeah.
Where you have, and then maybe you have some smaller events,
PPC. Yeah.
and maybe you have some side events that are non-bracelet events, so the mixed game players can have something to play. But like,
I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah. You guys like 8-game as a format?
I think probably that's the one. I mean, horse and 8-game seem to draw the best.
How about dealer's choice? That'd be fun.
I mean, dealer's choice it's fun, but it historically doesn't draw.
Doesn't draw. People don't play Badoogie, Badacy, all that.
Yeah. Right? What if you did a dealer's choice where it was 8-game?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
And everybody has to wear tropical.
What if you do? Yeah. What if you?
I kind of loved Tim Duckworth's idea. I think it was Tim years ago, or like a year ago, where he said like, and I don't know, like you could probably do this with a small field where, let's say they're the dealer's choice, right? There's 20 games where you get a set of plaques, or you get a sticker, you get like a card, and then it's your turn to call your game, Terrence. You got to call a game. So you want to play Limit Hold'em, right? Do you want to call it a level 1? No. So you call a game you don't want, you throw that out. You only get to call it once.
Yeah.
And then you got to go through the whole cycle. So that ensures that everybody's going to play all the games. And then it's strategic in the sense of like, when do you call the games? Like maybe the games that you don't play well, you just call them right away, obviously.
Yeah, they play them in the small levels.
Yeah.
Fold them.
So I think that could be like a fun way to, I love the idea. I don't know that, Bahamas is the place to try it, but anyway, just spitballing, thinking.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks to you out there for tuning in. Thanks to you guys for getting together. Daniel, happy 50th tomorrow. Next year, playing the seniors, obviously. We'll see if you get yourself into that. But again, thanks to everybody out there for tuning in. We will talk to you soon.